Welcome back to the Rice Report, everybody. Eric Rice here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us for this conversation series. Today, we're joined by former CIA Mike Baker. I'm sure you've seen him on Fox News. You've watched this podcast on YouTube. It's going to be a great conversation because not only is Mike smart, he's fun, and we're going to have some fun today. And I think that's important. So we're going to cover the Epstein debacle that just happened yesterday and the flailing arms all around the world that are occurring today, justifiably so. It's kind of a Mike, it's like a mortuary out there. It's like, some people never expected it. Everyone was expecting it to be laid in our hands, 10,000 hours of videotape. What's your take on this from the intelligence side? I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like we were just told by the AG, I have all these files. I have all this stuff. Months go by. And then all of a sudden we get a Sunday night drop, supposedly from the Department of Justice, which was confirmed by Carolyn Levitt, who, by the way, this morning gave us a tremendous consolation prize. You're not going to have any clarity on the Epstein files, but you don't have to take your shoes off at the airport anymore. This is how things are working right now, Mike.
Yeah, no, I feel it's a whole new day, right? I can keep my shoes on. I mean, good God, who hasn't gotten TSA pre-check by this time so they don't have to take their shoes off? So this addresses those 12 people who are still, taking their boots off. Anyway, look, I think the reason for the flailing arms is because Pam Bondi obviously came out and said, "Oh my God, wait till you see what we release." And then they come out with this, perfunctory note on a Sunday night, which is kind of classic Washington, D.C., or I'm surprised they didn't do it on a Friday evening.
Right.
And there's nothing, right? We're not, there's nothing to see here. Epstein killed himself. Let's move on. So I think in part what you have is you have a reaction to that obvious conflict.
Right.
Because for all this time now, people have been, getting on TV and talking about it as if they knew, right? Now, the honest God's truth is all those pundits who've been promising, wait till you see this, and oh my God, heads are going to roll, and people are going to be fired and sent to jail, and it's going to be a bloodbath, and who knows who's in there? Could be Bill Clinton, could be Donald Trump, could be. None of those people talking knew anything. They're just filling up airtime, right? They're doing what a lot of pundits do. They're just talking out of their backside without any real understanding because they didn't have access, right?
Right.
But instead of saying, I don't know, they couldn't bring themselves to do that. So that's one point. The other point is, Pam Bondi got way out over her skis and talked this nonsense about what we're going to release. It's completely unprofessional from her position, right? And so it's a complete cavalcade of mistakes. I don't know, what may be out there. I have no idea, right? So
And none of us do.
none of us do, right? So I don't know whether to be upset or whether to say, well, yeah, fuck it. All these people didn't know what they were talking about, so there was nothing there, and maybe Epstein, killed himself. I'm leaving that door open. I don't know, what happened to him either. It's so I'm kind of conflicted on this. I'm irritated, like a lot of people, because I feel like perhaps they're playing fast and loose. But at the same time, having worked in the government for a long time, I can believe that. Yeah, it just, this is one of those things where people were talking out of turn. They didn't have a clue what they were talking about. They made all sorts of promises. People got their, knickers in a twist thinking there's going to be something big at the end, and there's not. So I don't know.
I don't know. I don't buy that. I think there's something there. I think that there's a cover up happening, and I'm not afraid to say it because the next day you get the consolation prize of no shoes at the TSA now, which the TSA shouldn't exist anyway. That's from the Patriot Act, also a violation of our freedom. So.
Yeah.
I
agree. I think it is hard to imagine that if you just let's take one bit of this and say all those tapes that supposedly exist from Epstein's happenings. You're telling me that there's nothing on those tapes?
Not one. It's just Epstein blowing out birthday cakes. That's all. He's just blowing out candles. They're riding a donkey somewhere, just normal beach footage. It's
You telling me
happening.
yeah, so what, he just tape recorded himself? I mean, maybe he was a freak and that's what he was doing, you know? Maybe the tape's got nothing but him and Diddy on it. Who knows? But it does yeah, it kinda it's the same problem that exists with other, conspiracies that are out there, right? It's the same problem that with Martin Luther King or with JFK or some of these others. There's no clarity because you just have this gnawing feeling that we're being had
Yeah.
and that there's no transparency and that powerful people are protecting their own interests. I'm not saying anything, but again,
That would be a
I don't
complete
know.
shock if that was the case.
Yeah,
Complete
don't
shock.
know.
They would never do that. They would
No, that would
never
be
protect
shocking if that happened.
people.
My God.
Hey,
Could you
maybe they had the Diddy evidence above the Epstein evidence. So maybe there was a hole poked in the bottom of the box and baby oil leaked all over it and just ruin all the files. We don't know.
Okay.
We have
That's
no
it. They
idea, Mike.
just stacking cartons of baby oil on top and then destroyed all the tapes.
It's
A big
it's like
old
the
mess landed on the boxes of videotapes or whatever they've got. I just the one thing I don't really understand is Pam Bondi's actions, right?
yeah.
That part of it is really odd. I can understand the pundits wanting to fill up airtime and then not having any clue, but not wanting to say they don't have any clue, and so getting people's spun up. But Pam Bondi should have known better. That's a strange thing.
Yeah, especially since Ghislaine Maxwell's still in jail, right? So if Epstein did nothing and his partner's in jail, then why don't
Yeah,
we let her out, right? Do we
right.
do a free Ghislaine tour now? Is that the next protest wave that we have in America?
Yeah, all those people are going to put down their Palestinian flags and start waving for Maxwell's release. It is. Um,
Correction, Mike. They're Mexican flags now. They've switched.
oh wait,
Yeah.
although I have seen protests where they have both, which
Yes.
I think is very inclusive. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
The Palestinian protesters may be misled, but there is absolutely a genocide happening there. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
unequivocally true. So we want to make light of it because they're
right.
mostly paid idiots, useful idiots. But the useful idiots should be turned on Ghislaine Maxwell now. Like, so let her loose, let her go. If her partner did nothing, what crime did she commit?
Yeah. But how
Right?
about, just how about release the autopsy results for from the investigation for Epstein,
Yeah,
right? Or the flight logs. Do something. It was a strange decision because again, look, I'm one thing I'll say about this White House, the Trump administration, this one and the previous one, they never miss an opportunity to screw up a message, right? Or to screw up there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds here, right?
sure.
And so if they had sat back and said to themselves, what's the public interest here? Oh, it's pretty damn high. You think we can get away with a brief memo on a Sunday night? Yeah, it'll be fine.
It'll work out fine. Yeah,
It'll
no
work
one will
out.
care.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're being told now by all the pundits that you mentioned earlier. Because now the message this morning is, you know what? I'm tired of talking about Epstein anyway. I'm glad this thing's over. It's just ridiculous. We
Yeah.
just live in such a psychological operation clown world, and your former intelligence. These aren't mythologies. Like psychological operations occur every day
Yeah.
on both sides of the fence. It's part of the business, part of the world we live in,
Hey, it's part
and
of parenting too. Don't forget that.
it is
Yeah.
a part of parenting. That's actually a good point. Yeah,
Mm.
the original PsyOps, they begin in the home.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it is. It is. But I think they're probably right because, um, everybody's got ADHD in the US, right?
Oh,
So
sure.
the concept is, look, people will move on quickly if we just show them another shiny object,
Yeah.
right? So maybe
Oh,
that
yeah.
shiny object is, hey, look, the TSA says you don't have to take off your shoes. I don't know. That's probably not
It's
going to
not big
be.
enough.
It's not big enough. No, no. They needed to do so. They needed to say you could conceal carry on airplanes now.
That would
Uh,
be great.
yeah, that would be it. But I think because we tend to have a hard time staying focused, right, or multitasking, then they may be absolutely correct that a week from now, only the hardcore Epstein, followers are going to be thinking about this. Maybe that's what they're counting on.
They are. They are. I mean, that's the way to go with it. Because there was couple announcements. One of them was that 501c3 churches, which is kind of a scam anyway, are now allowed to tout political advocates, campaigns. They're now allowed to do that. I don't agree with that. You don't change the rules to allow one political side to be able to tout from the pulpit. If that
Yeah.
was the rule for 50 years, it should be the rule forever. And it's kind of strange that it happens with, like free speech is free speech, but if rules are there, rules are there. I don't want to hear political pundits being talked to me in the name of Jesus on the pulpit. I don't have any problem with a pastor endorsing a candidate. Obviously, I mean that should happen. But being campaign arms now, we're going to be bombarded with more politics. It's in our sports, it's in our schools, it's in every TV show in the world, and now it's going to be in your churches. That's another change we're making. Is that a consolation prize where now we have the Republican and Democrat Party from the pulpit now?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting a political pundit. We're inundated with politics on every aspect of our lives. Going to church on a Sunday, it was kind of your last reprieve, right? Maybe occasionally there'd be some message or comment, but usually it was just about being whatever, inclusive, or just being nice to people. How about you just be nice to people?
Yeah.
But now, now maybe that's not even going to be the case. Now we got to go in and listen to politics sitting in a pew on a Sunday. It's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, it's not going to go over well. I think you're going to see church attendance drop significantly from that, but new churches arise that won't do that.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think I forget what that. I read an interesting article not too long ago about church attendance. And the story has been for quite some time that it's been dropping, but the numbers show that it's kind of stabilized now, and maybe we're getting a little bit of an upward rise in attendance. Which, because again, people should believe whatever the hell they want to believe, but I do think that one valuable logistical aspect of churches was in the past they kind of held up and provided a support for the local community or for people. There was a safety net. Right. And whether it was your church or whether it was your local neighborhood, those things start to go away and you get what you get, which is disconnected individuals, more homelessness, more crime. So whether you believe or not, I think, churches have always served that purpose in a sense.
Well, apparently there's another new solution. The whole solution to the problem is to create a third political party. We don't have enough of them.
Oh, yeah.
We need a third one called the American Party, founded by three guys that weren't born in America. I think this is the best solution we could possibly have, Mike. What could go wrong?
Yeah, I know. That was bound to happen. Once, Elon Musk, it seems to be very good at telegraphing, sort of setting the table for what he wants to do or what he's planning on doing next. And once he talked about, a third party, you just knew this was coming. So I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing to have another party in the sense that the two parties that currently exist, people have been forced to the edges, right?
Yeah.
So, there is no centrist party. There's nothing that exists in the middle. And so who knows? I personally don't think it's going to work out. I don't think it's possible in these times. And part of it is connected to the idea of no term limits, right? So you get people in both parties who, are senators for 46 years and have, wielding a ridiculous amount of power and leverage. If we had term limits, then maybe you can set the table for another party that could at least address issues related a little bit towards the moderates on both sides, right?
Right.
And then they probably wouldn't win outright, but they would be an important element for one party or the other. And that would force them to think, okay, we can't just keep retreating to further and further out to the edges for either side.
Well, a political party does nothing but set narratives. I mean, that's what they do, right? They're setting narratives to get people in office, and hopefully those people get things done. We haven't seen that in 58 years, so it doesn't really matter. So we don't need another narrative creator. We certainly don't need an American party started by three non-Americans or naturalized Americans. We certainly don't need more H-1B visas or legal migration or loss of American jobs, which is kind of the party line that they're creating in the first week. So the first week's a complete disaster. But more importantly, term limits need to be applied to federal judges too. We always talk about senators and congressmen. What about federal judges who at 46 years old get appointed to a lifetime seat in charge of the judicial system, which is failing us in every possible way?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this needs to be taken care of too.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and I don't disagree. I never really guess could get my head around the idea of a lifetime appointment. Just has always seemed odd, even at the Supreme Court level. So, yeah, but I don't think again. Look, I'm one of those people that it's kind of going back full circle to the Epstein files. I never actually expected we'd get anything because I never expect any investigation or any measure of any note in Washington, D.C. to result in any meaningful consequences or actions. So all this time talking about the Epstein files, I never had any belief that anything was going to surface. It's like every other investigation. Investigations, go to die in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And you get a little rumbling, and people get their hopes up. Oh, we're gonna have a Senate investigative committee coming. Oh, bullshit! Nothing ever happens there. So that sounds really cynical. I sound like one of those old guys in the Muppet Show, sitting up in the balcony.
The two mean old bastards up there making fun of everybody.
Waldorf and whatever his name was. Yeah. Anyway,
but it's true. I mean, that's what we've seen for the last 10 years specifically. Huge things have broke. Benghazi, COVID, Russiagate, all these things. Nothing has happened.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. But hearings in Congress where people say great things. I don't know if people realize that half of the time what you're watching is someone reading from a piece of paper. Right.
Yeah,
These aren't
nobody listening. There's nobody there.
Nobody.
Yeah.
There's no one listening. It's all scripted, and we hear it, and people cheer about it, and pundits, claim about it, and other people looking for clues and what they're saying. But when do we see action? I mean, I think you and I are pretty much on the same line with this right now, where I'm like, listen, wake me up when somebody really important goes to jail for bad stuff. Kind of wake me up at that point.
Yeah. Gold Bar Bob Menendez was kind of the last one but he was so egregious, right? They couldn't ignore it anymore. The Democrats kept him in the office all that time. And finally it was just like, oh God, he's got more cash stuffed in his sport coats in his closet, And so I think it was just so awful that even they couldn't
cover anymore
and provide top cover. So I think it's, again, look, I'm a huge proponent of term limits. I just, I think maybe it doesn't, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it doesn't work at the end of the day, but I think it's worth trying, right?
Sure.
I think and they have tried at the state level before, and the federal level shot it down, said no, you can't do that. So I don't expect much, like everything else. I don't expect anything to come of it, but I'll keep banging on about it. Look, one thing I'd love to know if some enterprising investigative journalists would dig into finding out how much, let's just say the past 20 years, how much money has been spent up on Capitol Hill but for investigations, right? Because you got whole staffs working, you got investigators, you got all this money spent on a variety of investigations with no end results to speak of. A couple of headlines, and then people move on.
Don't say that, Mike. Don't be cynical on that. We spent $59 million investigating whether baseball players use steroids or not. That turned out perfectly fine. It was super important for legislative purposes in America. It was perfect.
Yeah, because it was really a mystery.
Yeah.
Are they or are they not? I couldn't tell.
Yeah, they're 298 pounds with veins busting out of their necks. 2 years ago they were 160 stealing bases.
Yeah, exactly.
But it accomplished everything. We ruined all these kids' heroes. It wasn't illegal, by the way. I want to say this, like, it wasn't illegal or banned substance in Major League Baseball at the time. They actually didn't do anything wrong. But we did spend $59 million, and plenty of senators made their name by crushing little kids' heroes for using a substance that wasn't even actually banned by the league. Other than that, I can't think of a single hearing or an investigation that we've spent money on that has gone anywhere. Even going back to like the Russiagate, I forgot the guy's name, but the staffer who lied on emails and admitted he lied on emails. He got like 3 months probation and probably a new car from the Democrat Party. Like, who knows what he got? I don't remember any investigation.
I've seen. I mean, look, take look at John Brennan, for instance, right? Former head of the CIA. I suppose if you were being enormously generous, you could say, well, maybe he just didn't understand how how bad it was to rely on this obviously bullshit report from Christopher Steele, who, by the way, it's questionable. And I mean, he's still out there on the circuit. He's still like speaking and talking and
Oh,
going
sure.
as an expert and everything. And thinking, really? But my company does due diligence projects all over the globe. We do, very complex investigations. We do a variety of intel collection efforts. It's not rocket science. You could have looked at that report as a junior associate in my company and said, wait a second, what's the basis for this? How credible are these sources? Let's dig into it a little bit, just a little bit.
Just
And
a
a
day.
little bit of that due diligence, right? It's like everything else. It's like FTX, it's like Madoff, it's like all these things. You just do a little bit of digging and you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble. But they didn't do that because it drove a certain agenda. So, but again, anything coming to that? No.
Yeah, I mean, like FTX is a publicly disclosed open source blockchain. Like everything was available. All you needed to do was have a computer, and you could find out exactly where money's going. And once you have access to the files, you could find that. I think he's going to get released. I'm not even going to hesitate in saying that. I think Sam Bankman-Fried is going to get released in the next 2 to 3 years because every other convicted crypto scammer has been pardoned at this point. So why wouldn't he?
Yeah, and you know what? What's the word I'm looking for? When you get redemption, redemption comes very easily nowadays in America.
Oh yeah.
Right? So after a year or two, and maybe it's tied to the fact that we all have short attention spans now. It's kind of been hardwired into us because of social media and the way that information flows. But I think you're right. I think that's probably going to happen with him.
Yeah.
But again, look, FTX was a perfect example of fraud. There's nothing new under the sun when it comes to fraud. But people, they saw, celebrities signing up and they thought, I don't want to miss the train. Right. So everybody jumps on. Nobody bothers to do any due diligence because, oh, look, whomever.
Yeah. Tom Brady, he's promoting it.
Yeah, that's great. So if I'm sure Tom did his due diligence.
He's the GOAT. It must be good.
Yeah, it's got to be good. So yeah, it's that part of it's understandable why people get fall into these traps. It's just human nature and greed, and fear of missing out, and so therefore it keeps people from doing just a bit of due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, that would be nice to have forward-looking due diligence on anything because that's certainly not happening with who's getting into office. We have open jihadists. We have absolute Marxists. We have, like Bernie Sanders. People forget Bernie Sanders had an S next to his name for 10 years. He was literally a socialist. He run under a socialist ticket. These are not permitted by the original formation documents of this country, by the way.
Yeah.
Not permitted at all.
I mean, the primary winner for the Dems in New York. I mean, Bondi is a socialist. He's a member of the, Socialist Party of America. I mean, he's, and he's a 33-year-old who's never held a job.
Oh, he did. He was a rapper.
Internships. He worked for his mom, I think. And, so, and he's just throwing out the same bullshit platitudes that we've heard going all the way back to Stalin.
Yeah. I mean, the literal exact phrases.
Yeah.
They are using exact playbook. Like Saul Alinsky would be so proud of the world today. He really would.
Yeah,
he would.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, look, I mean, maybe New York City in terms of management's got to hit rock bottom. It's like a substance abuser. They got to get to the very, very bottom before they start, catching on and rebuilding. But I don't know. I suspect he's going to win. He won a shocking number of votes from folks that you would think, really, you're voting for this guy?
Yeah.
It's free this, free that. Here's some more free stuff, and we're just going to tax the rich, and it's all going to work out fine. And I'm not telling you,
it'll be great.
But yeah. Anyway, people should do a little due diligence. Look into his actual work experience. Look into what he has actually done and hasn't done. Look at the things that he says and the practicality of it. That's what I would encourage people in New York to do. But, hey, it's a popular concept right now, and young folks get all excited about free stuff.
Yeah, and they kind of have to with the way that our economy works. Nothing's gotten better.
You're not wrong there.
Yeah, it's kind of a forced issue. It's almost like I feel like where you trained called the farm, that we're just corralled cattle being pushed in one direction or the other by the ranchers. It kind of feels that way.
You know what? Hey, I'm just glad somebody's as cynical as I am right now. Wow.
Well, Mike, talk to us about your podcast here. You got a great podcast on YouTube, and great podcast, and I think people should listen to it. It's not only informative and entertaining, it's also got some great stuff to get you going in the middle of the day. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. It's called the President's Daily Brief. President's Daily Brief. And the whole idea behind it was, let's just talk about the key events around the globe from a facts-based idea. Here's what's happening. We're not going to try to tell you how to think about it. Now, occasionally I get a little snarky on one issue or another, but for the most part, it's just, here's the top 3 or 4 events around the world. Here's what's happening. You figure it out. You think about how you want to think about it, right? We're not going to tell you. It's not an opinion-based podcast in any way. And so we do 20 minutes in the morning because that's a nice tight bit of time. People can digest it when they're driving to work or just sitting around the house drinking coffee or a Bloody Mary. And then the afternoon is 10 minutes. So twice a day. It's on Spotify and Apple and all the major podcast platforms. YouTube, thanks very much. That's at President's Daily Brief. Man, I'm turning into a marketing son of a bitch. But and then we do an extended weekend show where we have guests and we kind of dive into a couple of those topics from the week into much more detail. And so that happens every weekend. But it's turned out that there is an appetite for a podcast that just says, here's the facts. You figure out how you want to think about them.
Yeah, when I first started watching it, I actually put a post out on Twitter like a day before I watched my first episode, and I said, "Here's how the news is supposed to work. Here's an event that happened. Here are the facts behind it. Here's this party's opinion. Here's that party's opinion. Here's this party's opinion. You decide for yourself."
Yeah.
That's literally how the news is supposed to work. My opinion doesn't matter. I'm just some guy in my extra bedroom right now. So, but having facts and understanding what's happening is super important. So thank you for doing that. I think we need to simplify our news, and we need to remove pundit opinions on things because I hate to break the news to everyone, but most of them are paid for their opinion. So you're just being swayed in one direction. Again, we're just cattle being pushed from one side of the ranch to the other by the barking dogs.
Yeah,
and
no, that's why I never took, I was never a paid contributor, whether it was for Fox or CNN or BBC or, Sky News or whomever, because that way you can, whichever way you go, you don't have to tout a particular line. And also it was a little bit selfish because, we have a company to run and our clients are all over the map. Right. So, and again, I do tend to drive pretty much right down the middle, right? People always, there's a lot of folks I think that look at that and go, "Oh my God, that means you have no opinion." Well, no, I just I try to live in the operational world where I said, okay, here's what's happening.
Right.
And I don't think my personal opinion matters all that much. I like to focus more on the operational aspects of what's happening out there. So anyway, it's been a really good experience so far. It's a great team. It's run by an operation called Red Seat Ventures. Terrific people. We got really smart writers and researchers and producers. So they do a great job. I'm kind of like that. Remember that old toy, the monkey with the cymbals, and then you just wind it up and he claps his cymbals. That's there. Let's go. A man's got to know his limitations.
Yeah, and being a monkey in a zoo is all right as long as you're sharing good information. That's what matters.
That's right. Anyway, but thank you for letting me bang on about that.
Absolutely. And Mike, as we wrap up here, how can people follow you online? How can they? I know you're on Gutfeld quite a bit, and I love those episodes. And Fox News, guys, go back to reporting facts, please, and not your opinions on things, and get both sides of a story, please. Somebody let's try to do that. Let's try to have both sides of every story on everything Fox News. So if next time you're in the control room or in the green room, just kind of mention both sides of a story are pretty important because none of them are doing it. It's not just the left wing news.
It's almost every outlet has been overrun by opinion shows, right? Yep. As opposed to it used to be, the opinion shows would kind of be peppered in there, but now they kind of have taken over, and you have to really dig to find an actual news hour. So it can be tough, but I'm on what do we call it nowadays? The head of the America Party has that X. It's X. So that's at MB Company Man. We've got again the YouTube channel at President's Daily Brief. And if anybody's ever in Idaho, stop on by.
I will be soon. I think half the country might be moving there if we keep seeing our flooding.
It actually is the way it seems. Yeah, it does seem like we've gotten during the pandemic and the short years after, the movement from the West Coast in particular, from California, Washington, Oregon, into Idaho. I get people telling me all the time, stop talking about Idaho. Just shut up about Idaho. But I got to tell you, it's
No,
a wonderful place.
take their advice from a Texan. Stop talking about Idaho.
Yeah, thank you very much, man. I really
Absolutely, brother.
enjoyed it, Eric.
You got it. You got it. Thank you, Mike, for coming. And thank you all for joining us here today. So as always, God bless you. God bless this country. And we'll see you next time on the Rice Report. Have a good one, everybody.